Welcome to the Academy of Photography. I aspire to inspire until I expire. I'm Christian Tudor, and today I'm gonna talk about high dynamic range images. I'm going to follow up one of the previous tutorials where I have explained the concepts of exposure compensation and exposure bracketing. As a food for thought, I have tried to find a use for the exposure bracketing camera settings, and the high dynamic range, or HDR, came to my mind. What is HDR? What is high dynamic range? If you are familiar with the basic concept of exposure, you should already know that any click of your camera will give you only one result, depending on your camera settings. In most of the situations, if you have a scene where you have a wide range of elements with various brightness levels, the camera will expose for an average. Or if you are experienced enough to control it in the manual mode, you can ask it to give you a certain exposure for a certain element in your picture. The camera will never be able to expose for all elements in the picture in the same time. Unlike your eyes, which will provide you the best high dynamic range images possible, your brain will compensate the lack of light, and it will show you what is in the shadow as well as what is very bright in front of you. Unfortunately, your camera is not as smart, and it will give you only one single result. High dynamic range is the technique of combining several exposures taken of the same image with the camera on a tripod, and it will enable you to see the dark and shadow areas of the image properly exposed in the same time with the very bright areas of the image. It is a post-production tool to make the image show you all information possible. As a photographer, I used to like HDR at the beginning when I have discovered it, and I was really impressed for the first time. However, after abusing this technique for some time, I started to get bored and unimpressed with it as a very limited graphical language. I'm sure a complete beginner or someone who does not know anything about it could be really impressed. However, this is just me, and it might not be necessarily applicable to others. It's basically like one of those songs so good that will make you listen over and over it again until it becomes void, stripped by meaning, and it falls into disgrace. I also dislike the fact that the high dynamic range loses the power of the contrast and flattens everything into something that becomes more like a texture. It loses depth and the strong impact. If you step away enough, you cannot see the entire image, you just see flat surfaces like textures. This is not reality, it's just a graphic trick. HDR is something that you either love or hate. Despite the fact I'm not personally into it anymore, I can see some aesthetic potential and use for it. If you shoot in high contrast conditions and you want a result to overcome completely the underexposed or overexposed parts of the pictures, this might help. Images containing old vintage textures might take this HDR technique quite nice. For example, industrial rusty images or old sandstone churches or whatever. Also, a business application for HDR imaging is the real estate photography, which enhances the external or internal photos of a property on the market. HDR is a very useful tool to make properties look better, especially for the untrained eye of people who will see an image better than in reality. Let's see how we can create these high dynamic range images. This is a very simple question with a very simple answer. No matter what everyone is going to tell you, you will need a special software for it. There's no way around it, there's nothing else. You need to take several pictures on a tripod of the same image from the proper exposure level for the darkest element to the proper exposure of the brightest element in your picture. You need to take pictures in between and let the software combine the best parts of the image and give you the entire photo properly exposed. But remember, this is a trick, not necessarily reality. You could use the exposure bracketing for it, but it does carry the risk of getting it wrong, as you are limited by only 2 stops below and above the recommended exposure, which might not be necessarily accurate in the first place. I am suggesting that you do it manually by exposing for the darkest area and start taking individual shots in increments by 1 stop or 2 stops until you have the brightest part of the image properly exposed. This way you ensure you have enough exposures of the same image for a good HDR treatment. You can select 3 or 5 images including the extremes and let the softwares do the job for you. You definitely need to purchase this software. It does not come free. You can download it and you can do your own Google search for something that suits your budget or quality expectations. That's basically about it. There's nothing else. I'm gonna show you an exercise. I'm gonna jump on a computer. I'm gonna show you a bunch of pictures, and I hope you enjoy it. I'm just gonna show you a very quick exercise how to use high dynamic range for real estate photography. I haven't done real estate, but this is how I would go about it. I would definitely go with a lens which is probably wide and straight, not this one that I'm using right now, because this one is a fisheye and I'm pretty sure real estate agents won't appreciate it. However, you will need a wide lens to turn big small spaces into large ones. At least this is how you need to show them. So I would go and pick a 16 to 35 and probably also a tilt and shift. The wider the better. Definitely you need a 16 and below 24, because you want to have images as wide as possible. But this is about high dynamic range. So what I will do in this situation, let's say this room for example, I would start my exposure measuring how much light is in the darkest spot. In this case, this is the fireplace, the darkest spot, a lot of shadow. So first of all, I'm going to expose for the darkest. I'm going to take a measurement and start with that. And I'm going to go through increments in manual mode until I reach the brightest spot. In this case, probably the brightest spot will be the window. So I'm going to expose for the window, measure and see what's in between. Definitely go 3 to 5 shots in between these two levels of exposure. I would suggest that you need to set up your camera on ISO 100 to have the best quality, because you're on a tripod. You don't need to worry about too much. You can use the manual settings. Aperture, I would keep the same aperture because you do not want different images with different depth of fields. So I would set a very small aperture just to get as much as you can in focus and sharp. And I would play only with the shutter speed. Because you're on a tripod, you'll be in the safe zone. You can go for longer exposures. It's not going to matter because you will be on a tripod. So I would play only with the shutter speed, from the proper exposure for the darkest to the proper exposure for the brightest. You get 3 or 5 series, and this is what you're going to use in your software to combine them and get you a properly, not properly, but exposed image, a high dynamic range. Okay, just jumped on my computer and I have prepared for you 2 sets of images. One of them are external and another set is the internal, the one I just did earlier. On the left hand side you can see where the sky is blue. Probably this is an underexposed image, but the sky is properly exposed. This was the color at the time I took the picture. In between there's an overall exposure. So in this case it was just a normal exposure taking into consideration the entire scene. And on the right hand side is the overexposed image. You can't see the sky anymore, but the darkest spots of those buildings you can see a little bit of detail. In this case, this window is the darkest element of the picture, so the image is exposed for this, and that's why the rest of the image is a little bit overexposed. Same deal with the interior. And what I have done is downloaded a piece of software which is called Easy HDR. I am not 100% sure this is the best one. It's just the first one that came after my search, and I'm gonna use the trial because I do not intend to use this HDR in the future. I don't find it very useful, and I'm not doing real estate at the moment. So I am going to basically open the software and select the 3 images. We're gonna start with these 3 and see what we've got. So right now just importing all 3 of them, and the software will combine it for us. Just hit HDR and the camera will do its and the software will do the job for us. Now it's compiling and it's calculating the average, and it's gonna give us an effect which you can't have it directly with your camera. Okay, this is about it. As you can see, we can see much more clear, a lot of details. The contrast, this is starting to disappear. Of course, we can still see some shadows, but definitely we can play with these templates on the left hand side, or we can play with a lot of settings until we are happy, or whatever appeals to you. So in this case, as mentioned before, the contrast disappears and I see details in the whole dynamic range of the picture. That means I see details in the darkest spot, and I see details that would be even nicer if I would have some clouds, but the sky is preserved with its original blue value. You just export this picture and you can use it as you can see fit. There are a few variations around, but I believe that served the purpose. Obviously, I would recommend this if you're using it with very interesting textures, and if you have, as mentioned before, a bit of cloudy sky. This could look quite dramatic and interesting. Anyway, I am going to continue with the internal images to see you what sort of result we're gonna get. Basically, the purpose of this exercise is to generate an image which is enhanced from reality, and it's gonna show you a much more brighter image with less contrast. Okay, that's about it. A little bit dirty for my taste, but sometimes sometimes this dirt is the intention. In my case, it's not, because I'm not gonna enjoy that. However, this would be a very good tool for other interiors, not necessarily for this one, and I would probably choose another template where this dirty look is a little bit smoother. And as I was saying, probably I want to see a little bit more detail into the darkest spot, and because in this case the darkest spot was even too dark, the camera didn't picture much detail, but I still can play with the blackness. So there's a bunch of controls I can still play with, and the software is gonna try to adjust. And now I have played with the shadows and blackness, and I'm starting to see a little bit of detail. Not 100% happy with this, but I just wanted to show you to prove the point. You can do this exercise yourself, and if you come up with something spectacular, I will be interested to see. I'm gonna go back now. If you find the use or you come up with some spectacular images, feel free to share them on the Academy of Photography website. Also, as per usual, I am receiving submissions for photo comments, and feel free to send 3 of your images. I'll be happy to critique them for you. I'm always happy to find out how other people are approaching aspects of photography, and I will be happy to answer at any time. That's about it for today. I hope you enjoyed this. Do not remember to subscribe on the Academy of Photography website. Give us a thumb up if you enjoyed this, and until I see you next time, I wish you happy shooting. Thank you very much.